Let's look at Jean Louis De Lolme's writings about the Constitution of England, or an account of the English government. Imagine stepping into a time machine that takes you back to a world of kings, queens, and castles. Jean Louis De Lolme was like your tour guide, showing you the ins and outs of how things worked in England during those days. It's like exploring a really cool history lesson together. So, what's the deal with this Constitution of England thing? Well, think of it as a giant rulebook that guides how a country runs, sort of like the instruction manual for a massive board game. De Lolme was totally fascinated by this rulebook, especially how England was using it to make sure everyone played fair and had a say in how things went down. He really liked the idea of separating the power in a government. Imagine if you and your friends wanted to plan a party, but one friend kept deciding everything without asking anyone else. Not fun, right? De Lolme agreed. He thought it was much better to have different groups, like a team of decision-makers and a team of rule-checkers. That way, nobody got too much power and things stayed balanced. Now, De Lolme had a thing for balance. He thought it was like the secret sauce to a good government. Just like you'd balance different ingredients to make the perfect smoothie, he believed you needed a mix of power between the king or queen, the lawmakers, and the courts. If one ingredient was too overpowering, the whole thing would taste bad, or in this case, the government might become unfair. He was also really into the idea of checks and balances. Imagine you and your friends had to agree on a game before playing. If someone tried to sneak in unfair rules, the others would step in and say, "Hey, that's not cool." De Lolme thought the same thing should happen in government. The different parts should keep an eye on each other, making sure nobody was bending the rules. But here's the twist: De Lolme wasn't even from England. He was from Switzerland. So, it's like your friend from a different school visiting and saying, "Hey, your school does this cool thing with lockers. Maybe we could do that at my school too." He looked at England from an outsider's view and saw things that even the locals might have missed. One of the things he noticed was how people's opinions mattered. He was like that friend who's all about making sure everyone has a say in what game to play. In England, they had this system where people could vote for representatives who spoke for them in the government. De Lolme thought this was super important, like giving everyone a chance to raise their hand and be heard. But wait, there's more. De Lolme was also a fan of a free press. He believed it was like having a bunch of people watching the game and shouting if something wasn't right. Just like you'd want a referee who's not playing favorites, he thought the newspapers should be able to talk about the government honestly, without anyone shutting them up. So, why should you care about De Lolme's writings? Well, imagine you're playing a huge game of tag, and someone decides to change the rules halfway through. Not cool, right? De Lolme wanted to make sure that governments couldn't change the rules on their citizens without a good reason. He believed that by having clear rules, different groups with power, and open discussions, a country could become a fair and awesome place for everyone to live. His writings were like a guidebook that inspired people to think about government differently. Even though times have changed since De Lolme's days, his ideas still matter. Next time you vote in a school election or see news about how your country's run, you're part of the conversation he helped start, the conversation about how to keep things fair and balanced for everyone. De Lolme had this fascination with the idea of the law being a shield for everyone, kind of like a magical force field that protected people's rights. Imagine if you were in a game where everyone had an invisible shield to keep them safe. Well, De Lolme believed that the law in a country should be like that. It should shield you from unfair treatment and make sure everyone is treated equally. He was also a big fan of predictability. Think about how it's easier to play a game when you know the rules by heart. De Lolme thought the same about the government. He said that the rules and laws should be clear and easy to understand so that everyone knows what to expect. This way, the government couldn't suddenly do something sneaky that nobody saw coming. Remember when we talked about De Lolme being from Switzerland and looking at England from a different angle? Well, that fresh perspective helped him see the good and the not-so-good things about the English government. He appreciated the separation of powers and how people had a voice, but he was also worried about corruption and people in power abusing their authority. He wanted people to be vigilant, like those superheroes who keep an eye out for danger. He believed that citizens should pay attention to what the government was doing and speak up if they saw something fishy. This way, the government couldn't get away with unfair moves or shady deals. Now, De Lolme had a way of explaining complex ideas in a super relatable way. He used metaphors and comparisons that make you go, "Oh, I get it now." He was like that friend who explains math problems in a way that suddenly makes sense. You know how a puzzle piece fits perfectly into a specific spot? Well, De Lolme saw the different branches of government like puzzle pieces that fit together to create a complete picture. Each piece had its own role, but they all connected to form a bigger picture of a balanced and fair government. Imagine if you had a group project at school, and everyone had a specific job to do. If one person slacked off, the whole project would suffer, right? De Lolme believed that the government was a bit like that. Each part needed to do its job properly to keep the entire system running smoothly. His writings weren't just about the past, they had an impact on how governments work even today. You know how you and your friends come up with rules for games to make them fun for everyone? Well, countries around the world have taken De Lolme's ideas and used them to create rules for their governments to ensure fairness and protect citizens' rights. So, when you learn about things like the balance of power, the importance of citizens' voices, and the need for clear laws, you're actually getting a taste of what De Lolme was talking about all those years ago. His writings remind us that no matter how big or small, governments should always aim to be fair, transparent, and responsive to the needs of their people.